Hi everyone, and thank you for coming. First, a bit about me. I have a background in technology. I worked in telecommunications for a few years, and then went over to Accenture for some more management-like consulting. And then I managed a development team at OP5, which is a company that collects data from servers and network equipment. But some time ago, I decided to go on my own, and I work as an IoT consultant in my own company. And I'm also working together with a company based in Stockholm called DigiNav. In my spare time, I work with an open source project called MySensors, which helps people create their own cheap wireless IoT devices. If you buy the parts from China, you can build a device for less than 10 euros if you are prepared to spend some time and learn some things. And as Ida or Annika mentioned, I am a freelance writer for a Swedish computer magazine. It's a print magazine, and they are sadly dying away, but still about 35,000 people read it, which makes me quite happy. And I get paid to try to learn about the latest and the most exciting things, and then write about them, which is perfect. And also I get a deadline, so I really finish that project, which is quite useful, especially for me. And the last thing I wrote, the latest thing, was about an IoT conference in Amsterdam that I attended about a month ago, which was a lot of fun. And I also work with security. I'm part of the board of a project called OWASP, which is a not-for-profit charitable organization focused on improving security of software. So today, I'm planning to cover connectivity because, oh, I need to press this one as well. Sorry. I'll start with why we need IoT and why it's useful. I'll cover connectivity options and the cost. And I'll show you some devices that can be bought off the shelf that you can just buy and you can start using them today. And since we won't gain anything without having some business value, I'm going to cover a business case from one of my recent projects, a small company, just 25 people in the industry, and how I worked with them to connect their devices. So, in case anyone doesn't know what is IoT, for me it's just two things. It's physical devices, like thermometers, door sensors, motion sensors, a GPS, that is connected. And the most important part with that is that information can be made available from anywhere. Most of you probably have a thermometer in your house, but can you check that right now? Or in the business, if you have a lot of buildings or ships or something else, can you, from a central location or wherever you are, check what the temperature is or some other value that's useful? So for IoT, we need connectivity and we need devices. And I'll cover both of these. But first, why should we have IoT? We can use IoT for a lot, but I think the biggest value comes from getting better data to make decisions based on. Either that decision is made by a human, maybe it's something you're struggling with today, you don't know which is the right way to go. If you had the right data, maybe you could make a decision that would be much better. And the other part is automated decisions. Earlier today, we had a presentation about AI and how you can automate and figure out how to do things. An example is if there's a tank with chemicals that you use for some process, and when that gets low, you could automatically order a refill to make sure that you don't run out, and that will keep your business running. A good example of IoT is actually quite old. Sunfleet, a Swedish company that started renting vehicles per hour. They connected the cars so they could see where they are, how far they went, and thanks to that, they could rent by the hour and bill exactly for what was used, which they couldn't without the connection. They could also do this cheaply. When I rent a car at Hertz, there's some person that needs to check the mileage of the car and that it's clean and all things like that. They've removed that, so there's no one involved, which means they can provide this the car rental, at a much cheaper price. So connectivity. We can connect things via the mobile network. I bet most of you have one of those that uses the mobile network. It's great. But for Internet of Things, it has been a bit expensive. But just a few weeks ago at Mobile World Congress, a German company launched a new SIM card that costs €10 for 10 years of connectivity. You can only use half a gigabyte of data, which when you're using your smartphone wouldn't be much. But for an internet-connected device, that could be a lot. So the cost has come down. But we still have a power problem. If you had 100 devices that needed new batteries every 6 months, you'd be changing batteries in one device per day on average. That's not very fun, it's costly, so there is still some power problems. And well, for our phones, I guess everyone is used to charging their phone every night, but we can't do that for connected devices. Recently, a new type of connectivity has emerged. It's called low power wide area network. It uses the same idea as early communication with submarines. And from there you see the wide area. Submarines aren't usually close to you. This gives a longer battery life, so much less maintenance. And there are two flavors of low power wide area networks today that have become popular. One is called LoRa, which is for long range. It's very open. Anyone can start a new LoRa network, but that also means it's very fragmented. An alternative is Sigfox, which is the largest provider today of low power wide area networks. So the rollout for Sigfox in Sweden started in July last year. And by the end of the year, they covered 60% of the Swedish population. If you remember when the first mobile networks were launched in Sweden in the 19s, it took way more than 6 months to get decent coverage. So they're building fast. Roaming is included for the entire world. There are currently 45 countries with coverage. And they say that by the end of this year, they're going to have 60 countries. So, quite nice network. And the cost is about 10 euros per device per year. So, quite cheap. But that might not be the best thing, especially if you're interested in coverage. These are official map coverages, one from Telia with their coverage of the Swedish coast and over to Denmark, and one with Sigfox. As you can see, the Sigfox network has pretty good coverage over water, which I guess could be useful to some parts of Stena. And these are the official coverage numbers, but in the English channel, there have been tests showing that they get between 90 and 100 kilometers range. The English channel is 240 kilometers wide at its widest, which means pretty much the entire English channel has connectivity. And in case you're wondering, Sigfox is a French company, and I think that's why red means perfect. So the first time I looked at these was like, why don't they have any coverage on all the red places? Well, they have really good coverage. It's just their way of presenting things. Sigfox also allows, and all the low-power wide area networks allow a hybrid network, which means that you can put up a base station without getting an operator license. There's one really big shipping company. Unfortunately, I'm not talking about Stena yet, at least, that has decided to put these base stations on all their vessels. But why? Well, inside the containers, there are things that need to be kept cold or warm, and maybe they don't like too much humidity or something. So you put a sensor inside your goods, and you track all the time the value of, well, let's say the humidity. But out at sea, there might not be coverage, especially if you're in the container that's at the bottom of all the other containers. But with a base station on board the ship, they can provide connectivity for all packages in all containers throughout the entire journey, which is pretty cool. So we've established that connectivity is cheap and abundant today. What about the devices? Well, if we stay within the Sigfox world, there are more than 1,000 different devices that exist already that you can buy. And I'll show you some examples. This is made by a Finnish company. It measures temperature and the humidity of the air. So it's an indoor comfort sensor. It has an easy installation. What you need to do is that you open it up. There's a small connector for the battery. You plug that in, because otherwise you would needlessly use battery while it's in the store or being transferred. And so even though we get a good battery, we want you to have the entire battery life. So you plug it in, close it up again, and on the back there's some tape. So you peel off this and stick it on the wall. The installation is done. This unit costs about 100 euros, or 1,000 Swedish crowns. And that includes 5 years of connectivity. So now that device, unless someone steals it, will hang there and have 5 years of connectivity. It's going to report temperature, humidity every 30 minutes. And you get an online dashboard, and all that's included in the price of the 100 euros. So that's how easy and cheap IoT can be. A CO2 version of this device exists also, so you could measure air in a conference room, so you make sure that people stay productive and not make bad decisions because of the bad air. I think this morning, having that live in here would have been quite interesting, because then we were about 130 people in here, and, well, the air wasn't that nice. Next device. I don't know if you remember this pocket, but it now can contain an IoT device. This device is made by a Czech company. Their slogan is simple as Czech beer, cheap as Czech beer. I mean, you can't beat that. I think it's brilliant. But they're not really living up to their promise, because this one costs 15 euros. And that's a bit too expensive for Czech beer, at least if you're in Chechnya. Well, the company that sells these has 50,000 items ready for delivery right away. So it's not some prototype, you can get them. It's waterproof. It has a battery life for 3,600 messages. And you can configure the way it works. It can alert when it's moved, so you can put it in your backpack. And whenever your backpack is moving, you can get a message of roughly where it is and that it is actually moving. It can sense falling and send an alert, maybe for elderly people who might fall down and have trouble getting up, or if you have something that's sensitive that you need to send with some courier and you want to know if they are treating your goods in a good way. It can sense vibration while an engine runs and tell you the engine is on or off. Really simple way of measuring that. No installation, you just stick it to the engine and it's going to sense that. Doors opening or closing, a crane arm moving, or something like that. So it's quite flexible. The next one is unfortunately not in production yet, but it's shown here. This was at an IoT conference in Prague, that's the Czech beer, earlier or last year. This can be put inside an envelope, and when you rip that envelope open, you break a small circuit, and it sends a message, "I've been opened." That's all it does. It doesn't have battery for anything else. It doesn't have anything else. But the manufacturing cost of this device is 30 euro cents. So about 3 Swedish crowns. That means you can put it in almost anything. You can detect when emergency exits are opened. Often you need to keep track of those. So let's just break the small circuit when the door opens. Or when someone steals or just has fun with some life-saving equipment, a buoy or something like that, that should really be in place. When someone picks it up, it can send a signal. Then you know you need to check it out and maybe replace it. Some other examples. This is a company that has spa hotels, and they're measuring the water and air quality with small devices. Airbus, which is a pretty large company, in case you didn't know, they make airplanes and some other things. They keep track of all their spare parts when they're traveling from one warehouse to another by just sticking one of those trackers to the part. So connectivity, not a problem. Cheap devices, lots of them, with lots of different functionalities, and also quite cheap. What about the business? I've worked with a company that's called Plåt- och spiralteknik i Torsås. It's a small company. They build transporters, and as you can see in the image, the transporter can transport wood parts, it can transport ashes, grains, they transport pellets into machines that, what are called, into furnaces. Their model was they build this transporter according to the specifications of the customer, and they send it. A few years later, the customer calls and says, Torsås, we have a problem. What kind of relation is that? It's a bad start. They get slow feedback. So they decided to connect these devices. And I helped them find a device that was suitable. With it, we are able to measure how much this machine is running. So some run 24/7. Some run just when needed, so maybe 3 minutes a day. And of course, that will affect how often they need service. So what this company wants to do is offer the customer the right service at the right price. But they also wanted something very simple. They just wanted an excuse to call the customer and say something like, yeah, we see that your transporter has just passed 1,000 hours running time. I'd like to check in and make sure everything is all right. Do you need anything else? It's perfect for upsell and for making sure that the customer is happy. If they aren't happy, they're going to tell you, and you can adapt and learn. They're also looking at selling the data back to the customer. Most customers don't know how much their equipment is used. If they could get a monthly report or an online graph on how much they use their device, maybe they can make some decisions that will help them. And it also allows for transforming the business model. Now they charge for delivering the transporter, and they're done. But maybe they could start selling cubic meters of transported whatever they want to transport, a bit like Sunfleet. By the hour or something like that, they can start selling in a way that they didn't before, and maybe reach new types of customers that they couldn't reach before. And some details on this project. The time from my initial meeting to the first live installation with a customer was 6 business weeks. And that included figuring out how do we measure if it's on or not, which device, which connectivity. Was it going to be the cellular network or the Sigfox network? And there, the battery life of Sigfox was a big win. Of course, there's power when these are connected, because they need 3-phase power, because they consume a lot of power. But getting that down to a device that just needs 3 volts is a bit tricky. Of course, it can be done, but that would add to the cost, both for material and for the work they need to do when they build these machines. So just sticking the machine or the sensor onto the machine, that was the killer for them. And phase 2 in this project includes collecting ideas from employees and customers. Because when people see that you can start gathering this type of information, they start bubbling with new ideas. So just getting something small started, I think, is really important and really useful. Just get the snowball rolling. So how do we find these business opportunities? Well, IoT in itself doesn't add any value. I know media might not portray it in that way, but hey, we need to do something useful. And I think the people best equipped to do this is the people who know about the business. What are the daily problems? What data could we collect that would make our lives easier? What decisions could we make easier or even automate? But also, I think, working together with someone in technology, like was presented earlier today with the AI team, someone who knows about the technology who can help someone who knows about the business, working together, or as I think Annika likes to say, drilling holes in the silos. Someone who does that can get a lot of work done. So don't let a lack of budget stop you. Start with something simple. Get up one of these small devices, start measuring and see what you can do with it. If you can automate, humans make mistakes, and we make more mistakes when we do boring things, like having to do the same thing every week. Just use computers to make those decisions and free up people's time to do something they like and find valuable. I have an example where a thesis work at Chalmers that I'm helping wants to help Länsstyrelsen, which is a Swedish government part that needs to check pH levels in Swedish lakes. They do this manually once per month and go out to each lake and fetch the data. What about gathering that data automatically every hour without needing to go out and fetch it? Fetching it, okay, you get some fresh air. Well, at least not while you're when you're not in the car going there, which is probably most of the time. But still, it's not that much of a nice job. Collect the data and make use of it. It's possible to track deliveries from vendors or to customers. Make sure that they arrive, letting the user or the customer know where is the package, how is it going. It's quite easy with one of these trackers. You can start with just thinking, what is frustrating or takes too much time or costs too much money today? And see if you can use IoT to get the data and either make better decisions by humans or even automate it and make quick decisions automatically. And also think about what data could help you better serve your customers. How can we offer the customer what they need before they know they even need it? An example there was a company that makes paper towels. Not the sexiest product, but very useful. If you're out of them, you really want them. So what they did was, in public restrooms, like the one that's down the hall here, they put a sensor that could sense when the paper towels were about to run out and they notified then whoever was responsible. And of course, this led to them selling more paper towels, because if the paper towel dispenser is empty, they're not going to sell anything. So it was a win for them, but it was also a win for the people using that public restroom. So think about, is there something like that you could do? So I'll leave you with this. Imagine useful scenarios that have potential to deliver business value. Do some brainstorming. Test your idea. It doesn't cost much, and well, if it doesn't work, it doesn't work. That's fine. You didn't spend that much time or money on it. IoT can be easy, it can be cheap, and it can be incredibly useful. So I hope that you also find this. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Do we have any questions from the audience? Anyone would like to know some more? We have some from the app. Yes. Lotta? No microphone, you'll get one. Sorry.
So, right, the first question is, what is the band width for the LP WAN devices?
It depends a bit on what type of bandwidth you're asking about and what technology. LoRa uses a different radio bandwidth than Sigfox does. Sigfox uses a bandwidth of 100 hertz, which is really, really thin if you look in radio signals. But what people usually talk about when they ask bandwidth is, how much data can I push? You're not going to push video in this. No way. Sigfox says every 10 minutes you can send 12 bytes of data. You're not going to get much images that way. But 12 bytes is enough for sending GPS positions or temperatures or some simple measurements, and that's often all you need.
Oh, lovely. So we have another question. You mentioned using the IoT devices as sensors. What about sending actions to them?
Yes, absolutely. That can be done. I think it's easier to start with gathering data, because you can find a lot of value in that. But of course, if something acts up sometimes and needs someone to go out and push the on-off button 2 times just to get it going again, getting that connected through IoT to just reset it can, of course, be a lot of value. There's one important thing to think about, and that is anything you can control from the internet, maybe someone else can take control of it. So security becomes very important when you start measuring things or controlling things. Measuring things, okay, if someone is able to know what's the temperature in some house, probably not that big of a deal if someone starts eavesdropping on that. But if they can start the oven remotely and set it to 300 degrees and grill, then of course it could be quite dangerous. So yes, absolutely control things, but think about security.
Yeah, so that's going to be another topic for another session, I think. Yes. Cybersecurity yes. as a whole. Just curious, how many connected devices do you have in your home?
Actually, I don't have that many. I have 4 plants that report the humidity in the soil, which is good because then when I've forgotten to give them water for a few weeks, or my wife also happens, then we can get an email say, well, maybe it's time to look at the plants. Nice way to keep them alive. Yeah. Except that, I just have the normal stuff. iPhone, TV. Yeah. I haven't connected that much at home.
But you do have very cool, talk about ties earlier today, you have very cool cufflinks, you need to take a look at them. You are able to connect them to a computer, and then you will start your blog. Isn't that right? Very cool.
Yeah. So, in a way, I think it's quite interesting that I can plug this device into your computer, and it's gonna open a web page of my choice.
Talk about security again, yeah,
Is
right?
that really good? but it works.
Yeah, it works.
And it's fun.
Thank you so much for joining us today, Mikael. Thank you.